Hello, listeners. I want to share an amazing resource with you. It's called Hello Divorce. Founded by a lawyer and certified family law specialist, Hello Divorce can help you no matter where you are in your divorce process. So whether you're just getting started or if you're near the end but have stalled out and need help to get over the finish line, Hello Divorce can help. They provide full-service divorce support, and they can handle divorces of all kinds, all net worths, and with or without children. It's completely online, convenient, and they offer you support all the way through. Their clients get divorced in 1/3 the time and at 1/10 the typical cost. So go to hellodivorce.com/beyond and receive $100 off the cost of their services. And I want you to know, Erin Levine, who's my friend and the CEO and founder of Hello Divorce, was a guest on episode 197 entitled Get the FYI on DIY Divorce. So be sure to go check it out. We'll link in the show notes.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
The divorce agreement signed, and you're moving your own way, that you're comfortable with what's happening with your budget moving forward. And sometimes it's not going to be the $2 million house that you were in before. It might be a $600,000 condo, or, wherever you are in the country. There has to be some flexibility in where you're going to be living. That's hard for the person that's moving out to think, I shouldn't have to make any sacrifices here, right? But that's just the reality when you have just $1 coming in and now 2 housing payments to handle.
Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce, and most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today, folks, we are going to dive into the wild world of mortgages. Yes, I know, you're thinking wild world and mortgage. How does that add up? Well, let me tell you, mortgages can be one of the most important factors in your divorce. And knowing about that as early as possible is critical. So I've brought in one of my friends from California, and he's the perfect person to give you a good background and some top tips on what you need to know about mortgages as you go into your divorce. So I'd like to welcome my friend, Zach Taylor. Zach has been in the world of mortgage lending for more than 30 years, and he has a focus on divorce-related lending. So, Zach, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's a beautiful day out here in California, and you told me that it's windy as usual in Chicago, right?
Yeah, there's no surprise to any of my listeners about the weather in Chicago, and they probably hear more about it than they'd like to, but I can't help myself. It's ever changing here, whereas in beautiful Southern California, you don't have much variation in your days, which I actually loved when I lived there. But let's dive in on this mortgage topic. And I truly appreciate you and I have had a little bit of back and forth and some technical issues trying to get this episode taped. But I'm so glad we persevered, because this is a topic that many people don't realize the importance of jumping on this quickly, and just don't even really understand how mortgages differ from when you're a married couple seeking a mortgage, and when you're going through divorce and dealing with mortgages might be relevant. So let's start there, if you don't mind. And maybe you can just point out a few ways that mortgage lending is different when facing divorce.
Yep. And that's a question I get all the time. And it's a big one, and it's super important. And it's something that people don't really realize. They just figure that I did a refinance last year when rates were low. I bought a house. It was no problem, right? I know what's needed. Bottom line is the guidelines and the paperwork that's required for getting a mortgage when you're going through a divorce or post-divorce. And that means that if you're trying to buy out your spouse, or they're trying to buy you out, or you're selling and trying to buy a house either in the middle of the divorce or after. And the reasons is that the guidelines are really tricky. They're always changing, and the paperwork is way different than when you're doing a mortgage, when you're not going through a divorce. So that brings up the first point, is that it's really important to talk to a lender that focuses on divorce lending, specifically divorce lending, because of that. It can be a huge mistake if you just call your credit union and bank and go from there.
Well, and there's you mentioned one thing in there, and we'll sort of break this down. How is the paperwork different? Because most of the people who are listening, it's a very common thing that people have been through the lending experience, the mortgage lending experience as a married couple. In fact, we know the marital home is very often the biggest asset in a marriage, as well as very often the biggest debt. So they've probably been through the process of getting a mortgage as a married couple. How does the paperwork, you said, differ when you're applying for lending going into a divorce or after a divorce?
Okay. So I'm going to just go over one paperwork requirement that is common for when you're trying to get the lowest possible interest rate. And so if you are the person that's receiving the support, whether it be spousal support or child support, and you need that income to qualify for a mortgage, right? There are a couple of things that you need to make a note of that are super important. Number one is that income has to continue for at least 3 years from the time that the loan is going to be consummated. People forget about that. So if you have twins that are 16 and you're qualifying for a loan, if you're working with a regular lender that doesn't understand all this, and that's $3,000 a month in income, that's a big number that, you're going to get it, but it's not going to be usable for qualifying. Number two is that the income that you're getting, you have to show, obviously in the marital settlement agreement, and I know in other states they call it a divorce decree and whatever, but just the divorce settlement paperwork. Once it's signed, you have to show that you're supposed to get the support, right? Obviously. And then you also have to demonstrate that you're receiving it. And you have to show that you've been receiving it for 6 months, steadily, consistently, from your spouse, same amount, in your own individual bank account, right? So I see people all the time, they're just, the husband's been managing the finances, which is more common than the other way usually. The mother or the wife that's receiving the support, he gets the Chase checkbook, she gets the US bank checkbook, like during the divorce, and he's just transferring money from one joint account to the other, right? That's not income for her. That's just moving money around. So it can come from a joint account if you haven't separated accounts, but it has to go from one account to the other.
So there's a lot of, sort of what I'm hearing is backup data to show this income stream. And I think for listeners, this will be the first thing for them to realize is that when you applied for a mortgage as a married couple, the banks and the lenders were looking at your income as sort of in total, the two of you together.
Just like that.
Right? Yes, I see you're
Not
making
like
the joint hands. Exactly. And now as going into your world post-divorce, your ex-spouses or soon to be ex-spouses income, if you're the one, applying for the loan, their income doesn't apply toward this anymore. It's not taken into consideration if you're applying for the loan. And so it's your income. So whatever you might be earning, if you're earning, and then you're talking about the support you might also be receiving, but it's not just the fact that you're supposed to receive it. You have to prove how long you're supposed to receive it and that you've actually, what I heard you say is actually received it consistently for 6 months.
Right. So a couple of things you don't want to do is, I just talked to somebody yesterday and she's like, oh, I'm getting it. Oh, but he missed a couple months. So he paid 3 months in a row last month, right? So from an underwriter's point of view, is that steady, consistent income? No, that means that it's like it's like having sporadic employment. You're not getting the income regularly. So it wouldn't be used. You need to wait until you have a 6 month set. The other thing that I see people do is when you have kids, right? you owe each other money for stuff, right? Like, hey, I paid the recreational soccer league fee and it was like $500 and you owe me $250 for it. So I'll see support coming in. It's supposed to be $3,000 a month and it's $2,750 one month. It's $2,650. It's never $3,000 like it's supposed to be. So don't do that. Take all the money and explain to your spouse, I'll Venmo you back whatever the difference is. Make it as easy as possible for your lender to see that 6 months steady coming in.
That's a really important point that you just made, because people do that all the time. They offset other expenses against support. And as you just said, the support amount isn't in full. That's a bad idea. Let me just say that for listeners. That's a bad idea all the way around, because if the question ever comes up, if someone's current on their support and they've been paying less because you've been doing this offset thing, that's trouble for everyone. And the accounting nightmare or the bookkeeping nightmare has cost clients more than the amount of money we were arguing over, more times than I care to count. So
right.
Please don't do that. In fact, I have an episode with the founder of Decomply talking about that whole scenario. I'll link to it in the show notes.
And I'll tell you when that error happens the most frequently, which I know you're going to ask me. So I'm just going to answer a question that I know is already coming. And that is that these errors are happening because they didn't talk to a lender early enough in the process that knows divorce lending, right? They waited until the third mediation, or they're already in litigation. They're going back and forth. I mean, I've talked to people that they're 6 months into it and they haven't gotten this piece figured out yet. A mother, spouse that hadn't been the one controlling the finances, right? The husband had been doing it all and paying all the bills. So she did the right thing. She called me as they were just getting into their first mediation. They were referred to me by their mediator, and part of her homework was, hey, if you want to buy out the house, buy out your husband, got to talk to a lender, right? So she did the right thing and she did her homework. And so I gave her the steps. I said, hey, in order to get this done, number one, do you have your own bank account? No. I go open up your own bank account, right? So she did that, get the support coming in. They had a temporary order, right? Because it wasn't final yet. I said, just make sure that money is coming. Boom, 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 right? And I said, on month 5, we'll have 5 months. We can get the application in, get it approved. And then when month 6 comes along, close the loan, right? So boom, 5 months later, she called me, while rates were still 2.5 or whatever, right? And then, if she had waited for the whole thing, right, it would have cost her like 2% in interest rate if she had not talked to a lender in advance. So it was just, she listened to the advice. And it might not just be for me, but anybody that is super experienced in divorce lending would hopefully give that same advice. And then she was able to meet her needs and what she needed to have done as fast as possible, not having to wait 12 months or 18 months or whatever. So,
as a mediator, as a divorce attorney, this is an issue that I really want to emphasize for everyone listening. Do not wait until the middle of your process, or as many people do, till the divorce is finalized, to meet with a mortgage lender like Zach, who has experience with lending in divorce situations, because you give yourself more options as you negotiate your divorce if you understand what your borrowing power is and what options are available to you and what it's going to look like for you if you do refinance. Because Zach, you just raised a really important issue. The lady that you were just talking about managed to take advantage of lending rates while they were still low, even though they were on their way up. That's because she had set herself up for success.
Right.
And she had come to you at the very beginning. She also, I will point out, during her mediation process, knew what she was going to be able to do and to afford. And I think that's something that people don't really understand and think, well, I'll get to that if my mediator or my lawyer tells me to get that information. Anyone can call you up and ask you for help with this, right?
It's never too early. You do not need to wait for your attorney or your mediator, this mediator was really good and said, she gave out homework, right? Between session 1 and 2, both of you guys, here's what I need, right? Whatever it was. And that was one of the items. Because I had another true life, story of someone that did not call a lender right away. And they had gone past mediation. They were like 6 months into litigating, and who knows what fees they were, lawyers' fees that they were paying here. and just a huge error. They were negotiating over who's going to buy each other out. And of course, what the trade out's going to be, what the price is going to be, how much it's going to be. And after I had the opportunity to talk to both of them, it was very evident that it wasn't going to work out for either of them. The wife could not qualify. And by the way, we always talk about the post-divorce budget. Even if she could qualify, the payment was going to be way too high as she's working with their certified divorce and financial analyst to work at all. So it's qualifying is important, but also, guys, you got to look at your post-divorce budget because it's not the same as when you're married. And then I talked to the husband, and he could qualify to buy her out, but we're going through the math, and I'm like, well, your support is $7,200 or whatever it is, right? I said, is that really a comfortable payment for you? So the bottom line is they ended up selling the home, and they could have just done that like 6 months ago and saved thousands of dollars in fees, right? So they ended up just selling, moving their own direction. And, I think she rented it for a while. He bought a house, right? But they could have just done it 6 months before and saved tons of money. 15 minutes on the phone, no credit report, no application. An experienced lender should be able to give you a pretty accurate picture without having you apply and do that mess, right? Just a quick phone call to see what's going on and do kind of a analysis.
So that's interesting to me, Zach. So what you're saying is, we have, I'll call them Bill and Bob, and they're getting divorced. And Bill has been the breadwinner. Bob has been the stay-at-home dad. And Bob wants to find out what would be needed if Bob wants to keep the house. Can Bob call you before they've filed for divorce, met with a divorce attorney, started divorce mediation? Can he just give you a call and in 15 minutes get some information?
Yeah, absolutely. The more accurate, it's a place to start, right? That's what I tell people when they call me. And typically it will be after they've at least talked to a mediator, or there's a document, there's a process, a form, a program called the Disamaster. So it's very helpful. The Disamaster, which you'll explain to people what it is, spits out numbers on what potentially the support would be. So if I can get at least an idea of, what that is, just, what are you guys ballparking as the value of your house that you're going to use for the splitting of the assets? Was there any separate property that was used to buy the house, right? Because we have to factor that in. If you used a gift or inheritance or your own money to buy the house, that's going to lower the amount of the buyout for you. And so just those kind of basics, what your debt, your credits are, job. And then, that's enough for me to be able to do a couple little worksheets to say, here's a place to start. It's enough for somebody to say, holy moly, I can't do it, or, hey, this looks like it's workable. So that when they go to the second session of the mediation, or they go back to their attorney to make a proposal to their spouse and their other attorney, they've got something to work with.
Hey listeners, I want to take a minute to share some exciting news with you. You all know my wonderful friend Bella Gandhi, America's and Divorce and Beyond's favorite dating expert. You've seen her all the time on Good Morning America, Today Show, and all the morning talk shows. Well, two things I want to make sure that you know about. One, go check out her website, the Smart Dating Academy website. She has tons of resources, programs, and coaching, all there to help you find, as Bella says, the lid to your pot. And you may not know it, but she has her own fabulous podcast with great guests and lots of wonderful insights and tips from Bella herself. So go to smartdatingacademy.com to find both all of those resources and the podcast, or you can find the Smart Dating Academy podcast on all major podcast outlets. Stay tuned for more from Zach Taylor, divorce mortgage expert, and learn all the facts that you need to know when you are facing divorce and have to deal with one or more mortgages. Trust me, it is much more complicated than you think, and in this case, knowledge truly is power. So listen on.
So you can run a couple credit reports free throughout the year just to make sure that they're being paid on time too. Because if all of a sudden the mortgage has lates on it and your spouse is supposed to be making those payments, then there needs to be a conversation. You need to dial it in as far as during the process, who's paying the bills, because you don't want to have them go delinquent because it's going to cost you.
If you are finding this episode helpful, be sure to listen to all of the many divorce and money episodes that we have on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. We have experts like Heather Locust and Lily Vasileff, two of the leading divorce financial professionals in the country. We've made it really easy for you to find these episodes. Just go to divorceandbeyondpod.com, click on the menu item for divorce topics, and then click on Divorce and Money. You'll find them all there.
And now we return to today's show.
At the very least, you find out what information you need to bring back to your mortgage broker to help find out what your options might be. And that's the other thing, right? I think you can, also help people determine what type of loan might work best for them, what type of, buyout might be possible, how money can be pulled out of a property, out of the equity. Are those typically questions you can help with?
Yeah. And, sometimes the buyout just doesn't make sense. So the conversation needs to switch right away is, where are you going to live and where are your kids going to live if it's not going to be in a marital home? So then the decision becomes, if you're going to have to sell or you're the one getting bought out, we have to look at rent versus own and do all those computations. And typically, it's really important for the spouse that is moving out to realize that now you have two households on the same income, right? I mean, the income's not going up, right? You got $1 coming in.
Not usually.
Before divorce, you got $1 coming in after divorce, but now you got two housing payments and two households. So sometimes the bad news is, sometimes I'm the giver of the bad news, which is, hey, you know what? You're not going to be able to live in the same neighborhood or lifestyle that you had before. If you want to be in the same school district, you're going to have to look at maybe a townhome. Maybe it's going to be a lower price. And again, not just qualifying, Susan, because there's programs that allow us to be flexible and qualify, people that, debt ratios are high or whatever, but does it fit your budget? Right? We got to make sure that what they're doing so that when all the MSAs, the agreement, the divorce agreement signed and you're moving your own way, that you're comfortable with what's happening with your budget moving forward. And sometimes it's not going to be the $2 million house that you were in before. It might be a $600,000 condo or, wherever you are in the country. I'm talking.
I was just going to say.
I'm talking California here, but wherever you are, you might.
Zach's in Southern California, where $2 million home, frankly, is kind of normal, crazy as that might be.
There has to be some flexibility in where you're going to be living in this day and age. And that's hard. That's hard for the person that's moving out to think, I shouldn't have to make any sacrifices here, right? But that's just the reality when you have just $1 coming in and now two housing payments to handle.
I'm so glad you've brought this up because we've been talking about the mortgage lending experience during divorce and post-divorce from the perspective of the recipient of support. Right. But what effect does it have when you're applying for a mortgage post-divorce or during the divorce process and you are the person obligated to make a support payment? Does that have any effect on the lending process?
For the person that is paying the support that you're talking about, right?
Yep.
Well, obviously, once they file and it's public record that they're going through a divorce, at any time an underwriter can do a quick search and see, right? Basically, the guideline is once you file whatever support you're paying, it's going to be disclosed and it's going to count against you when you go to do your thing. If you're going to buy out your spouse or you're going to buy somebody else out. Plus, you got to supply bank, a couple months bank statements and whatnot, and they're going to see, hey, what's this $7,000 a month that's going out. So even if you don't disclose, it's in your bank statement. It's better to be upfront, and just state, hey, here's what the situation is. But I tell people, you wait to file until we have a conversation, because it can make a difference for the person that is paying the support if we can get something done before they file, because then we don't have to count the support in for them. And so that allows them to take cash out, give it to their spouse that's moving out as cash out. She goes off a loan and title, and it'll help them accomplish what they want to do if the numbers are bigger. And then we just have to make sure that whatever they're doing, because, we're getting them qualified without that $7,000 a month payment. And so I said, hey, we can qualify you, but don't forget that, once that you're going to have that payment. So just make sure that whatever you're doing will fit your budget.
What I think I'm hearing, and I think this is really important as well for listeners to hear, is this can be something that if you have the right mortgage broker who can give you information, this is something where you can make agreements that benefit everybody, that can make the lending experience and opportunities for both sides of the fence the best they can possibly be. Right.
And let me repeat this, because if you're filing, you're filing. So I would say that, maybe in 20% of the discussions that I have, there might be a few more options if we could do it before they file, right? Whatever that is.
Okay.
So what I tell people, if you've already filed, don't be sitting there going, oh my gosh, I filed and, I should have talked to a lender before I filed. It's just a couple cases a year that I talk to that there's really a benefit to doing something before you file.
Okay. But I can see where at least the option's gone if you haven't spoken to a lender and you filed.
Why would you cut off options? That's my thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So there's no time that's too early to speak to a mortgage broker if you're looking at a divorce situation.
Never. I talked to somebody last week, hadn't even talked to her husband about, she's been thinking about it for a long time. And she's like, but where am I going to live? Where are my kids going to live if I go to my husband tonight and tell him I want a divorce, right? Like she's got all these things in her mind. And so she had a friend that went through divorce that I helped a couple of years ago. So she called me and, I kind of just gave her the facts on, here's what it would look like based off of what you're telling me, right? Obviously it's super preliminary, but I'm like, if you got this much support, or if this was your job. And, I just kind of ran through the map with her, which, after she hung up, she shot me an email just saying, thank you, because in some of our other divorce workshops that we do, information is your superpower. That's what Laura McGee out here in California, that's one of her sayings. She's a mediator here in California, is that information is your superpower. So I gave her some information and she was feeling like she had some superpowers in order to go back to her husband, either whether it was, hey, I'm not ready to talk to him about it, or, okay, now I've got the information and we need to start the discussions.
Well, and you've described a very common situation. My listeners are going to recognize this. When Erin Levine, the founder of Hello Divorce, was on, she said that statistics say the average person who has asked for a divorce has been thinking about asking for it on average for 4 years.
Yeah.
And part of that is because of questions like you just raised. Where am I going to live? What is it going to look like? Where are the kids and I going to go? And that's something that a mortgage broker can give you information that will help you. And power, knowledge is power. And education is empowerment. And I also do want to give a little shout out to Laura McGee, because she's the friend who introduced us, and she is a fantastic family mediator in Southern California. But if you are divorcing in San Diego or in California, give Laura a call. I'll put her information in the show notes. So Zach, maybe, what are let's close out maybe with a couple of, mistakes you've seen people make and your tips to avoid those mistakes.
Okay. I've got a big one, and it doesn't even need you to have a house, right? Typically the house is the biggest asset and the most important. So anybody just listening to this that doesn't even own property, this is for you too. Because we've been focusing on the house, so maybe people aren't even get kind of tuned out, is that you need to run your credit reports and share them with each other in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. I love the website, www.annualcreditreport.com. So forget about the free creditreport.coms, this, that, whatever. Annualcreditreport.com is the only website that's authorized by the federal government. They forced the 3 agencies a number of years ago to supply free credit reports. So you go on there, you run your credit, your spouse runs a credit, share them openly, because when you fill out your disclosures, you're not only disclosing assets, you're disclosing liabilities. So number one, it'll help you make sure that it's accurate. Number two, you'll see what individual accounts you have, what joint accounts you have. And then there's this weird one called authorized user. So Susan, if you and I are getting divorced and we have a $50,000 Chase card and you are an authorized user, obviously I might not remember that. And as we're getting divorced, I might want to, if the Chase card is not in your name, but you're an authorized user, I better take you off that as an authorized user, right? And so those are the things that you can resolve when you are doing it. And then you know what the debts are, and then you run one at the end. And then don't forget to if you're removed off of a credit card via the settlement agreement, right? The settlement agreement says that Susan, you and I are getting divorced. Susan, you're getting the Chase card and you get the $50,000 balance and all the payments that go with it. That's been negotiated, right? But if I don't get taken off of that card, it's, and you don't make the payments, that's trouble. And do I have time for a 1-minute story?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So true story, a couple of years ago, lady called me for a refinance. She'd gotten divorced about 2 years before, and I run the credit report, and I'm just like, not in front of her, but I'm just looking at it going, oh my goodness. I mean, there were like collection accounts, there were late payments, late charges, charge-offs. The lenders had even just stopped trying to collect. So I call her back and I go, you said you had perfect credit, but look at all this, it's impossible to do anything. And she was so upset. She's like, hey, the marital settlement agreement said that those 3 debts that went to charge off were my husband's, right? But she never ran a credit. She never did the work to get off the credit, and she never ran the credit report to double check. And so, yes, he's liable per the marital settlement agreement, but that doesn't matter to the creditors, right? If he doesn't make the payments, I can't believe that she didn't get any collection calls or whatever, because she is on the hook because she didn't get taken off the cards. So just because your marital settlement agreement says that, Susan, you're responsible for the credit card, you're responsible for the mortgage, right? And so it doesn't count when you're qualifying, right? So those payments, because the marital settlement agreement is a legal agreement and it says those are your debts, right? So when I go to qualify, they won't count against me because I have the agreement. But if you don't make the payments, I am still liable for them. Do you understand the difference?
I completely do.
Right.
And
so
I've seen
people out there understand the difference because she didn't. And so it really affected her. So, I mean, it took us about 3 or 4 months to get, we had to backtrack and do all kinds of work. And so we ended up getting the refi done. But we never got the credit score up to where it should have been. So it cost her 3 months of a lot of hassle and work, and maybe a quarter interest in rate on a $600,000 loan, which, you do the math. I mean, that was a costly error that could have been resolved by just running the free credit reports. By the way, when you go on there, don't click on the ads. It's all free unless you click on ads and want to get your credit scores and all that stuff. They charge for that.
Okay. Well, and I think that was an important aspect that you just talked about as well. The correlation between your credit score and the rate you're going to qualify for on your loan, because many people don't understand that and why a clean credit report is so important. And you just mentioned a quarter point difference, but on a $600,000 loan, you're talking about big bucks on a monthly basis, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's $1,500 a year. It costs her in interest costs on a $600,000 loan. That's what a quarter point per year is. So
exactly right. So it's
10 years, 15 grand just in 10 years. Yeah.
Because your ex didn't pay the loans or the credit cards they were supposed to pay the way they were supposed to. But
you gotta take some accountability. She didn't follow up or do any of the work to get removed off the cards either. So yeah, he didn't pay, but she has to have some accountability there, right? Too. So
right. It does go both ways. And your credit, and for many people, they don't understand how credit works and how it needs to basically be babied along and paid attention to at all times, but especially when you're going through divorce, because I think one of the times where we see significant damage done to people's credit is when they go through a divorce. And lenders don't care. They don't care that it was a hard time in your life. And so for 3 months, the mortgage didn't get paid on time or the credit cards weren't paid by your ex. Early
in the divorce, if you can't run your husband's credit report unless it's not kosher to use his. So that's not, I'm sure you have all the information too, but in reality, 80% of the stuff on there is probably joint anyway, if you've been married for any number of years, right? If you run it early, because who's paying the bills during the first divisive time of the divorce, right? Like that's like, are you paying this? Or I'm going to pay this. So you can run a couple credit reports free throughout the year just to make sure that they're being paid on time too. Because if all of a sudden the mortgage has lates on it and your spouse is supposed to be making those payments, then there needs to be a conversation. You need to dial it in as far as during the process, who's paying the bills, because you don't want to have them go delinquent because it's going to cost you. It's a key factor and just one of the many things that you need to be aware of, because awareness is how you begin to make sure these mistakes that Zach is talking about don't happen to you. After 30 plus years in the business, I know we could go through more mistakes that people have made, but if people want to find out more about how not to make mistakes and how they might be able to best approach refinancing or financing post-divorce, how can they reach out to you, Zach? I'm actually old school. Phone is fine, which is 619-813-7908. Or you can reach me at ZachTaylorMortgages.com. Zach at ZachTaylorMortgages.com with an S, plural. That'll get to me as well. But the conversation, what I tell people, because some people are like kind of nervous and they email me and, what do we do? And basically 10 minutes on the phone. We don't run credit reports. We don't get an application. And this is just truthful. I just tell people, do call me, because we're just going to have a conversation. Let's find out what your situation is, what your goals are. And then I'll call you back and we'll run through what those potential options are. And I'll even shoot some worksheets out so they can visualize and see. We'll have a Zoom, whatever. It's very rare, Susan, that I need to get an application or run a credit, maybe once a year on the divorce scenario up front, because self-employed, LLCs, five companies, rental properties, if it's complicated and they want to get solid information on what's possible, then I might need to get an application or credit, but it really is rare. Really is rare. We can just do it over. And in those instances, you do what you do if you want the information, but the key is the information is critical. Right. And the sooner you have it, the better your options and your choices about those options will be. And hey, he's not scary, folks. You just had a conversation with him for half an hour. Give Zach a call and he's going to help you out. I really appreciate your taking the time to talk about this with me and my listeners, Zach. And I encourage everybody to reach out to him. I'll have all that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Zach. Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.